Welcome back to the Convo Couch, my humans. I am Pasta Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella.
And Johnny Sue is still spinning on those ones and twos. And today we have a very special guest, a great guest. This is kind of like candy for me, fam. You know how I am. And you know how the Convo Couch is when it comes to election integrity. It's one of our biggest issues.
Yep.
We feel it's very, very important. So we went deep into the treasure chest to get out one of these guys who is old school. Right, fam? We watched this movie the other day, the documentary.
Yes.
Doesn't have enough views. It doesn't have enough views.
Yeah.
We don't have enough eyeballs on the situation. Today, we brought in Clint Curtis, and we're actually titled, Let's Get to the Bottom of This, You Know What. And Clint was a computer programmer, He worked for NASA, but then he also ran for Congress under an election integrity platform, fam. He also is the star of his own documentary, Spies, Murder, and Voting Lies. Clint Curtis, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Good. Can we hear him good, John? Everything sounds good? Perfect. Clint, so when I put up the advertisement for the show, say Clint Curtis was on the show, a lot of people were immediately going, that picture, is that the guy who's the principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off? That's immediately who they thought you were. So can we confirm that you are not that guy right away?
I'm not that guy. I get confused for famous actors all the time. That guy and Mr. Ed.
Mr. Gotcha. So listen, Clint, let's rehash your story and let's get on to some serious questions. I'm really glad you joined us today. Thank you so much, and you did so quickly. You work for a company called Yang Securities. You did contracts with NASA and whatnot. But what is Yang Securities exactly before I go to the rest of your story?
Well, it was actually called Yang Enterprises.
Yang Enterprises.
And they did all kinds of contract computer programs for various state and federal agencies.
Okay, so you were a computer programmer there. One day you were approached by Tom Feeney, right? Or a representative of Tom Feeney, who asked you if you could plant a bug in the source code that wouldn't be able to be detected, correct?
Basically, he asked for a electronic voting machine where someone could walk up and touch it anywhere or put some type of flag up, and then they could select who would win a particular race.
Yeah. And who was Tom Feeney at the time?
Tom Feeney was Speaker of the House in Florida.
All right. Very important to understand right now. So we have the legislation coming saying, hey, can you help us cheat? Now, you kind of made it public. I believe you once eventually testified. But at the time, you had a whistleblower, a guy by the name of Raymond Lemmy, who was going to come and break this case wide open. But then he ended up dead. Who is Ray Lemmy, real quick? And your thoughts on the murder.
Yeah, he was actually an investigator at the Florida Department of Transportation.
Gotcha.
And I'd already been fired by then, because once you come forward and become a whistleblower, the first thing you do is attack you. So I'd already been fired by then, so I was working at a dollar store, stocking shelves. So kind of a letdown from computer programmer at NASA, DOD, all that. And now I'm stocking shelves. But he comes in and he keeps asking me questions. And then towards the end, he came in and said, I've got this all figured out. I have a few more meetings. I've tracked it all the way to the top. You're going to be thrilled. I've got this thing broken wide open.
And then he ends up dead.
And 2 days later, he's dead.
Okay. Very suspicious murder. It happened in Georgia. I believe there's no autopsy on a suicide, but in Florida it would have been different. We couldn't get to the bottom of it. He's dead. Case closed. And we fast forward to today, and basically we are stuck with a crappy election system across the board, owned by corporations. 3 major corporations own the bulk of our tabulation machines. You exposed this, but you ran for Congress twice on a election integrity platform, correct?
Correct. I'm actually running again in District 6 in Florida.
You are?
And
awesome.
We're still bringing it up, because if we don't fix it, it'll never be right.
Well, that's great, because that will lead into the
elections.
first question for today. The first big question is, when we look at your movie, and if everybody goes back and watches your movie, it was back in the Bush Gore kind of era days, and it was really apparent at that time, and it appeared that Republicans were stealing for Democrats. But now, today, from what we experienced in 2016 primary with Bernie Sanders, we're talking about in Brooklyn, what happened in Arizona, what happened in California.
And in 2020 as
2018 and 2020, where there were election integrity activists ready to go. Can we now say, even Tim Canova, what happened down there in District 23? Isn't it safe to say today, Clint, that election rigging is now a bipartisan practice? It's not just about Republicans against Democrats. It's Democrats doing it as well.
It's worse than that. It's so easy. It's not even about Americans doing it anymore. Now anybody can join in. The Russians can help. The Chinese can help. It's just an easy process to go in there get your code on the inside, make the results what you want to, and then do the best you can to keep somebody from counting the paper ballots, because that's where you would get caught.
Okay, and you said in your documentary, Murder, Spies, and Voting Lies, that to fix the election crisis in our country, we need to stop all other forms of activism for several months, like saving the whales, or in order to actually get rid of this whole problem. So why do you think election integrity is that important, and why haven't people actually why haven't people become aware of this fact? It seems like people have been ignoring it, or they just don't really pay attention to it, because there's no transparency in our elections right now. And the fact is that our elections are run by shadow corporations, and we don't have any say on that.
Correct. And the reason we need to focus just on this area, just only on the elections, is because until you get the right to vote, everything else doesn't matter. You won't be able to save the whales if you can't get your people elected, even if they win. So in order to win an election, you can't win by a little bit. If someone wants to tinker with the results, you have to win by a lot. You have to win by enough that no one looking at it would believe it. And that's hard to do because we're in kind of a 50-50 area. So if you care about the climate, if you care about anything, honestly, pollution, if you care about guns, if you care about education, whatever you care about will not get taken care of until we can get elections where we can actually vote and know that the person we're voting for can actually get elected.
So, but just how do you do that? How do you get people's attention, for instance, to stop protesting? Let's say right now what's happening, police brutality. We have economic crisis because of the mishandling of the pandemic by all politicians. We have all these things, lack of health care during a pandemic. How do you get those people to halt and get them to listen to election integrity? Because it's, human beings are present creatures. They pay attention to what's happening in front of them, and it's a biological thing to have food, shelter, etc., these basic needs covered. So how do we get them to pay attention to something like election integrity, which seems to a lot of people removed from the immediate concern?
I don't know. I knew that. All that 20 years ago. Maybe you can do it. When was that? When was that documentary made?
2004, right?
Okay.
2004.
I've been working on this issue and telling people forever.
Yeah.
The election with Trump should have been, something that just jumped out and told everybody that there were problems.
Right.
The whole Russian involvement. Everybody said, well, there is no Russian involvement. Everything is fine. And then what was her name? Reality. Do you remember her name?
I know who you're talking about. Reality Winter.
Reality Winter, yes. It's a funny name. Reality Winter actually came out and showed the documents where all this hacking was going on. We would not even have known about it if she hadn't stepped up and told us, because they had denied it. And then they come in and tell us something else. So we can't believe what we're being told.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, for doing that, for actually stepping up and showing us that our elections had been hacked and getting people even a little bit of knowledge, not a lot, but just a little bit, she went to prison for 5 years.
Yeah. I know the whole reality Winner, not Winter.
No, it's Winner.
The whole situation. We watch Kill Chain and whatnot. And I can tell you right now that I don't believe that the Russians are hacking our elections. I believe it's the legislation, the establishment, the elites and stuff. And I think a lot of times things do get lost when we kind of paint this picture that the Russians are hacking it, and people don't understand that the establishment, and that's what I saw with the Democrats over 2016, 2018, and 2020, is that all the Republicans did was the beta testing. Who runs the machines in Florida, the tabulation machines in your district right now, Clint?
Republicans.
Who the tabulation machine is owned by who?
I don't ES&S, I believe, isn't it?
Okay. Do we know who owns ES&S?
No idea.
You can't find out, right? Okay.
Can't find out.
So it's really, really hard to find out, who owns these machines and whatnot. Okay, so let's talk about this other situation. I'm going to do 4 and go back to 3. All right. Since your discoveries and unmasking of the source code trickery, there's been a huge divide between election integrity activists, okay? there's hand counters, a bunch of them, who really want to just do away with computers, saying, no, source code issues are a problem. We can't have that. But then there's this group of open source activists, okay, we've had some of them, I followed them, who want to have a public open source code for everybody to look at. Why has there been a split and those open source people thrown out of the room? I mean, are we really to believe that we're going to go to hand counting only and get rid of open source whatsoever? Or isn't it better that we have open source tabulation machines where we do an immediate count at the precincts and then hand count audit so we get the best of both worlds? Because I don't want to go away from computers. I want to one day vote online if possible. What are your thoughts on all that?
I propose, and I've always proposed, a hybrid of both. You should have the scanners. You can scan because everybody wants to know 2 seconds after the polls close who won. They want to know who won. So we can tell them a presumptive account. And then we can go through and actually physically count the ballots to find out if it's correct. The audits, you can play with audits. Anything that's got a system can be gamed. So just go through. I don't care if it takes a week. I don't care if it takes a month. In 2016, the same thing that was going on here was going on in Denmark. They called me. They said, we have Russian and Chinese and all these people hacking into our systems, and we don't know what to do about it. How do we secure them? And I said, there's no way you can secure those systems. You can go to a hand count. You can go to an open source if you could build it. And I think they were only like a month out, so it was impossible. They actually threw their machines out, hand counted everything, and the Trumpian right-wing figure that was running in Denmark did not win on the hand count. Prior to that, they were afraid he would. As far as you said, it's just the establishment. It's everybody. It is open season on cheating.
Yeah.
The last cheater wins. So whether it's the establishment doing it, whether it's the Russians doing it, whether it's me doing it if I took a liking to it, whoever, the last person in, can dictate what that vote is. And the way we've set it up by actually making it illegal in Florida to count the paper ballots, unless there's actually a recount going. And even then, you're not allowed to physically count them. We have legislation in Florida that says you can't physically count that ballot. It has to be run through the same machine it was run through in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, we have legislation in play which says you have to use machines. And even still, I don't think that machines are going to go away. I don't want to run away from technology. I want to embrace it, so I want to do it the best way possible. But in your movie, Harry Hertzty said he can hide he can hide a bug in an open source code. I don't know if I should call bullshit on that. You didn't say that, but open source, if we have an open source, doesn't it have a ton of eyes on the situation? Is it hard? I mean, can you hide a code in an open source software?
It is harder. It is harder. The problem is it depends on how long it is. The prototype that I wrote was 24 lines long. That's really all you would need to run a counting system, not a scanner, because a scanner has to find the dots and actually build the grid and reproduce it. So it's a little more complicated. The coding they use for the voting machines they have now have 250,000 lines in them. So you can hide something if you're creative, not if someone's really looking, but as long as you have that hand count to check it, that presumptive count will almost always be correct, because you're going to check it. It's kind of like doing an audit with a bank. If you never checked your bank account, would it still be correct? Who knows? It wouldn't have to be, because you never checked it.
Well, I'm glad you. A lot of the hand counter people always say, talk to Clint Curtis. You can, you got to get rid of this open source thing. We just got to go right to hand counting. So that's why I said we have to get to the bottom of this, because I've watched the movie twice, and I felt that you have kind of wanted both the systems, like immediately put it into an open source tabulation machine. Everybody can see it, make the counting public, and then audit it with a hand count so you get the best of both worlds. Yet these two parties, the activists, can't even be in the same room together, and I think it's a shame because they need to all sit down together. But thank you for clarifying that.
Right, they want one or the other. Well, the problem with one or the other is you have to trust it. And there have been instances where paper ballots have been cheated as well, where, the Republican ballots ended up in Lake Michigan and Chicago, and someone's ahead in a race, and all of a sudden they find a box of ballots laying in somebody's trunk.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you miss that, honestly?
Yeah.
Do you not pay enough attention to notice that you haven't delivered all the ballots that you're supposed to in the middle of a recount election. So, you have to make sure that it's very transparent and that everybody trusts everybody. Another element that I think we need to incorporate is that we need to have the supervisor of elections have two of them, one from each party in each office. Because even if the guy's honest, the other side, when they lose, is not going to believe that.
Right.
And we need to develop the trust in the system that we don't have. And we shouldn't have it. There's no reason to believe in something that says, I will tell you who wins and you can't check it.
Right.
They should give the Convo Couch that job in LA. So we can handle the elections, because we've been following this down the rabbit hole.
Yeah,
well,
and so yeah, what he's talking about is we experienced massive voter suppression in Los Angeles. Of course, voter suppression is obviously long lines, one machine in a very populous area with a lot of minorities by coincidence. And, three machines at a college campus of 50,000 people. But then there was the other side, the provisional ballots, the just not giving people the ability to vote, disenfranchising voters. And we also had a whole new system here that relied heavily on the machines, which was the computer. What was the name of it? The ballot marking device. And more nefariously, though, was the push of the provisional ballots. What is your experience with these types of ballots? How do we assure that these voters aren't pushed out? How do we, because they're further scrutinizing these ballots, but how do we push away this usage of provisional ballots?
Well, provisional ballots almost never get counted. And that's the problem. They get stacked on a back shelf somewhere. And when someone comes in and they're filling out a provisional ballot, pretty much they know that they're not going to be voting anyway. It's kind of like, okay, go stand in the back of the line.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that everyone gets the right to vote. And what I am proposing is that we make a cause of action for people who are prevented from voting, so they can get money out of it if they're stopped from voting. The county can start paying these people if they have a provisional ballot they don't bother to count. Because if you start paying people $2,000 or $3,000 because they sue you because you cheated them, they're going to stop cheating them.
That's a lawyer's
Get a cause of action, take away their immunity, and say, you had this person stand in line longer than 40 minutes. Apparently, you're not smart enough to plan. Therefore, you owe them $2,000.
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to have many people standing in line?
No.
No.
You hit them where it hurts.
Figure it out.
Yeah, you hit them where it
hurts. You
hurts.
could also make it a criminal activity if it's ongoing, if it continues. It's criminal. You prosecute them under federal law.
Dean Logan would be locked. The registering in LA would be locked up for life.
Yeah, he would.
But he'd be the last one, because the next one would be smarter.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, we went into a room full of provisional ballots, and it was a mess. It was a literal giant room full of provisional ballots, and they had hired people with no experience to kind of figure out if they were valid or not. And then you saw like the different stats.
Who has experience? Where do you get someone with a long work history of provisional ballots?
Right. So. I mean, but the whole system is just very dysfunctional at this point.
Yeah. So we have the front of the house, which we talked about, this voter suppression. Long lines, which I think is a great suggestion. If somebody waits longer than an hour, they get paid. You know what I'm saying? Therefore, they'll have a fast, efficient system that works and allows people the right to vote. Because, a lot of these single mothers, these people who have to work 2 or 3 jobs, they couldn't wait on the line longer than 3 hours. And those were young, progressive votes that were going to vote for Bernie Sanders over Joe Biden in LA. And that's a shame that they moved them into provisional ballots too, and these other areas where they were lost in the machines. So now we know we have that voter suppression there. We talked about the back of the house where the source code is cheating the tabulation machines. Let's talk about the other area of concern, which I want to know if you know anything about. When Kennedy beat Nixon back in the 60s, there were claims there were people from mail-in ballots in 2 areas. In Texas, where Lyndon Baines Johnson had some friends, and in where his daddy in Illinois had friends, there were thousands of dead people who voted in a mail-in scandal. We've seen the same thing here in LA, not on a high level because we haven't been able to get in there The same way we're not allowed to get into the machines, the black box voting, they keep us away from where all these mail-in ballots come from. What do you know about the mail-in scandal that could happen? Because I think this is one of the biggest areas that's not being looked upon. I tried to track down where these mail-in ballots are made. Now, in LA, our mail-in ballots are made in Seattle. That is confusing to me. And then, like, you know, who's giving them the information, the e-poll book? Are they, you know, where are they sending mail-in ballots to? Even the mail-in ballots itself. We have a central location, Norwalk, where all the registrar is, where the office are. Well, they don't even send the mail-in ballots to the registrar's office. They send them to a P.O. box. So who the hell is sitting there waiting for that P.O. box? Who can go get them? Your experience, you ran for Congress now. This is your third or fourth time, right? So I know you know more than just programming. I know you know elections. What about these mail-in scandals? How do we get a hold of this situation? And what are your thoughts there?
Once again, the two people at the office for the SOE should balance that out, because there would no longer be and when you get into like a party break, like you have Bernie Sanders and you have whoever the other one was that time, whether it's a Biden or a Clinton or whatever else running against him. When you get a party break, having that party person may not be enough. So you may need representatives from the parties to actually elect someone who goes there and makes sure the ballots are taken care of. Down in Broward County, during the 2016 election cycle, we had a report of someone coming in and they were basically bringing in mail-in ballots, throwing them in the trash, so you know they weren't copying them, and writing up their own. And it was actually turned over to the police. It was an affidavit that was signed. It was presented to a judge, and no one really did anything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the person who was in charge was eventually fired, but even still, it didn't solve the problem of, you know, who got the votes and who didn't.
Yeah. I mean, did you guys, other than that, I mean, what would your suggestion be for mail-in ballots? I mean, do you think we should be limiting them? I mean, I know with COVID, they want to go to a whole mail-in system right now.
Right.
But in the future, what would you suggest as far as the mail-in ballot situation? Because how do we make them public records? How do we know they're going in? I mean, all that stuff. What would your suggestion be to kind of curtail the cheating on that end?
Well, the issue is we do have to validate the signatures. In England, they had a big process of mail-in ballots. And it was a little nothing race. But it got some attention from people. So someone had walked around and picked up the ballots of the people who don't usually vote in the little nothing races and filled them out for them and sent them in. The only thing is, quite a few of the people that normally don't vote in those races complained. So they knew it happened. So they started checking it and figured it out, and they finally fixed it. So we would need a way to validate that the ballot is accurate and it's coming back correctly, and that you have eyes from both sides watching it when it comes in. If it has to be duplicated, you would have to have eyes from both sides to duplicate. I would never let a CSOE's office duplicate a ballot all by themselves, standing there without public scrutiny. Makes no sense, because then they get to vote who they want to. It's no better than the machine voting for you. It's now the SOE. If they decide they don't like somebody, what keeps them from circling the wrong bubble?
Yeah.
Exactly. Johnny, did you have a question?
SOE stands for?
Supervisor of Elections.
Yeah. Okay.
You
We have a couple super chats, but I have another question. You have a question? Or?
Go ahead.
All right. So let's talk. Before we talked about the fact that a lot of people aren't paying attention to this, that you can't save the whales. You know, I had a friend, you know, who's an activist for homeless people, all that stuff, and we have to kind of concentrate on this first so we can get these things situated. But it seems like the grant money or everything to get it out there has kind of been convoluted of who gets what. Who's making the decisions of, as far as, you know, there's a lot of grant money that comes out of the federal government to get our election straight. Well, where is that going to? Is it going to the right place? Have the election integrity activists done a good job? Because this is an area, and believe you me, we know activists on all battlefields, whether it be homeless, racial justice, you know, public banking, we know. So we see the split and the divide sometimes out in the streets when they're not working together. The same thing seems to be happening with the election integrity activists. What is the government not doing to get this in the eye of everybody? This is why I think it's with the cheating is coming straight from the elites and the establishment, because they're purposely keeping things in the shadow.
For sure. Because they benefit from it.
Yeah.
it's really hard to get someone who's benefiting from something to actually turn that system on its head.
Yeah.
It's hard to go, well, I'm making millions of dollars on this, but I'll let the little guy in. That usually doesn't happen. And so the people who get the money are usually the people who have the money, who have the lobbyists. You're going to get Microsoft in there lobbying things and paying out, donations to particular congressmen and stuff. And then when they do the grants, they're going to know how to fill them out.
Yeah.
Also, it's a matter of doing it professionally. The people who have the least experience and the least money also probably write the poorest grants. I write grants for nonprofits as well, just for fun, because they didn't pay anything.
Yeah.
But they write bad grants. They don't read what the actual grant says. A grant will tell you exactly what they want you to do. Newsflash, write that down. Don't be creative. Don't say you're going to do something else with the money. It will immediately kick you out of the grant process. So a lot of the people in areas that don't get funding aren't doing the process correctly.
Yeah.
And even then, they're fighting the big boys who have professional grant writers, who will read it, who have lawyers who will check it, and who have money to buy politicians so that they get a little heads up in the first place. So
what is the quickest way then to, because obviously what I'm hearing is that we need systemic change, like the whole system, the way our elections are run, it's just not efficient. It's not secure. So what is the quickest way? Is the quickest way to vote somebody in if you can't even do that? Or is there a way to like protest, like what's going on right now with police brutality, to generate some sort of movement for election integrity and make that one of the demands, similar to what's happening in other countries like in France, where they have a list of demands? Is that another mechanism into getting what we want? Because if we can't vote for it, what other power do we have outside the electorate to try to achieve fair elections?
If you have enough votes, if you make a tremendous impact, then they can't afford to flip it. They can only afford to flip it if it's close, if they keep it close. So if you hear that an election is 50-50 or going down to the wire, that's the one who probably will not necessarily be decided correctly. If you hear an election is 20 points ahead, they're not going to flip it. It would be crazy because everyone would know and everyone would change. Back when I ran in 2006, I did a poll, right? I think it's the day before the election, Zogby poll, showed that I was within 1 point of Tom Feeney. That's who I was running against, the guy who asked me to flip the vote. In the actual election, I won on the paper ballots, and I won on the early ballots, also paper, but I lost on the machines. And I lost enough on the machines, even though technically that shouldn't be the big bulk of the vote, that I lost the election. I lost by 18 points. What we did is we walked 12 precincts. Every voter got affidavits, showed that the election results were off by between 12 and 24%. We took that to the House of Representatives, and they ignored it.
Right.
So if it looks close, it can be flipped, and it doesn't even matter if it's a ridiculous number at that point. So you got to get out there, and you got to make sure that's important. Tell the people you're voting for, you want them to say, I want to have that ballot counted at the end. Paper ballot, count that thing. I don't think care if it takes 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
Just give it time to do it. This whole, okay, we have an election now, tomorrow, we have to have the results, and we're going to cut it off. Why? What's the point?
Yeah. And I want to make sure that we make this clear that even though, I might be an open source person, I'm still advocating for a paper ballot. If it's got to be a ballot marking device where they can see it, I wasn't too upset with a ballot marking device when we had them here in LA. I was just, concerned with the process where we put them, where they go, where they get tabulated. I mean, they're taken to a central tabulation place, which once you leave that precinct, I'm done with that. But I want to make sure we say right there, it's a paper ballot. We have a paper ballot. It's counted. So therefore we can re-audit and recount it by hand. So I want to make sure that's, you guys have the DRE machines in Florida, right? The direct, no paper whatsoever.
I got rid of those.
Okay.
In 2006, when I did the contest with the House of Representatives,
Yes.
I was going to file this suit with the Supreme Court. We made a deal. Basically, get rid of the machines, and I'll run again next time. So,
Yeah.
that
But they're
kind
in
of thing.
Florida still. Half of District 23 is in Dade, and the one part in Dade uses DRE machines, while the other part, which is in Broward, uses paper ballots. So they're
Are they
still
back?
all around.
I didn't know they came back. I didn't
Yeah.
know they came back in Dade.
They came back.
I did not know
And that's the worst thing. There's no tracking these whatsoever. I heard they were using them in Texas. Like, you go up and you press a screen and you walk away, and people actually think that their vote is counted that way.
that. And they're stupid.
Yeah. Can you bug those things from a distance? Like, John found when we went to New Hampshire, we found that they had SIM cards within their machines, and we were like, Jesus.
There were SIM cards in the black, where you drop all the ballots into the counting machine.
The tabulation machine.
And they were hand-marked ballots, and you drop them into a black box counting machine. And the election official told us there were SIM cards in there. And I'm like, why are there SIM cards in there? Because I did some more research. SIM cards give you access to the network, right? They give you access to a network.
Well, actually, you have a networking protocol once you plug it in. So a lot of the old networks, most people won't know this, but the old people will remember when you could network your house simply by plugging it in, use the wiring from your plug-in to actually connect your network connection. So there are 1,000 ways to hide a network.
Yeah.
And if the programmer knows what he's doing, and they should, then they'll know how to go wherever they want to go.
Yeah. Do you have any friends in Congress that you think are pushing this forward? I mean, I know we'll probably disagree on Wyden and his friend over there, because once again, I think a lot of the problems has to do with this whole situation when it comes to election integrity is that it's who's to blame, who benefits most. So this is where that discussion comes in, where I understand a lot of people are saying, well, it could be the Russians, it could be the Chinese, it could be the establishment, it could be whoever.
Technically, it could be anybody.
It could be anybody, technically. Yeah. I get that, but I'm saying, like, no, who's benefiting from this the most? We saw the Republicans kind of steal from the Democrats back in the days in the George Bush era, but this time there was a big progressive takeover, and they used the election process to make sure that those progressives didn't take over. So that's why I'm convinced that it is the elites or the establishment, whoever's running the matrix. But is there any friends in Congress or any bills that you know that you might want to talk about?
Not that I know of this really pushing it hard. I've had a lot of success with other countries that have come and talked to me and actually changed their systems. But here, it's hard because I think the people who are winning don't really want to challenge it. And the people who are losing aren't able to.
Yeah.
So there's kind of an issue there. And if you do challenge it, then you're a sore loser, you're a terrible person. So as far as your Russian thing, though, let's get into that real quick, because I know you don't think Russians had anything to do with it. But did you know that the Russians attempted to get into every database in every state, into the voter databases?
When you say the Russians, who are you talking about? Are you talking about the Russian government? Are you talking about individual actors and stuff?
No, I'm talking the Russian government. This is supposedly the Russian government. They also broke into the company that tests the machines. Now, why would you break into a company that tests the machines and identifies vulnerabilities if you're not going to use it? From a programmer standpoint, the people that were hacked would be the people I would hack in order to get into the machine.
Okay.
So it would make no sense to go to all that time, expense, and trouble if you weren't going to use it for something.
Okay, that's hearsay.
And maybe they didn't.
Yeah,
but...
that's hearsay. That's hearsay. So why didn't the Democratic, the DNC, which, and I also want to point out that 2 years ago, CrowdStrike in Ukraine said there was zero empirical evidence that Russia hacked the elections. Why didn't the DNC just simply give up their servers over to the FBI and the CIA or whoever wanted to look at them? Why did they hide them and hoard them?
Maybe there was something on them they didn't want to see.
And let me tell you something. If it's Russia wants Bernie Sanders to be the president more than anybody.
Exactly.
More than anybody. He's the one who's going to denuclearize. He's the one who's going to take all the missiles off the border of NATO. They didn't want they might have wanted Trump over Hillary.
For sure.
For sure, because she's a war hawk. But at the end of the day, they wanted Bernie Sanders. So why wouldn't they cheat for the guy who would give them the best peace deal whatsoever?
And also the mainstream media narrative is that
Yes.
Bernie is a Russian asset.
Right. The mainstream media narrative was that Bernie was a Russian asset. Another thing is to, by focusing, which I agree, anybody could potentially hack our elections if one person can do it, and any programmer technically could. So we can't say that they couldn't. But by focusing the election corruption on the Russians, the Democratic establishment was able to remove the attention from themselves and put it on the Russians. The mainstream media pushed that agenda, and therefore we're not looking at their own corruption in their own elections. Also, the fact that we were willing and ready and attempted to invade Venezuela because saying that their elections weren't valid, and
Jimmy Carter's Institute.
And the Jimmy Carter Institute
So
decided that they have the most valid elections. So to me, it seems hypocritical only because we are not seeing the dual treatment. If I saw that we were looking at the Russians as much as we were looking at the establishment, okay, fine. But it was a one-sided thing, and it was manipulated to really push an agenda. And I think we need to clean our own house and look within our own house first before we start pointing fingers. Because, I mean, yes, the Russians might want to influence our elections, but we are influencing elections
More than anybody.
all over the world. So
Of course we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course we are.
And let's not forget, too,
And
Clint.
the newsflash is we are hypocrites, and we always have been.
Yeah.
We just
Absolutely.
are. What is good for us is not necessarily good for anyone else.
Yes.
Okay.
And let's all forget, in
So-
your home state, there in a Florida courtroom, the Democratic Party said we can go into the back room, fill with cigar smoke, and pick whoever we want. They've given us every reason to know that they cheated that primary. I mean, in Brooklyn, how many people were knocked off the voter rolls? How many votes were purged? What they did in California was disgusting the way they set it up. They closed 70% of the polling places in Arizona that day. I mean, every single state after state, you saw them cheating. It
Well,
was like
even
they
in
got
Kentucky
cheated.
right now.
Yeah. They got cheated in during what was it, 2000, when Gore and Bush cheated them. So it's like, okay, this is now regular practice. They're like the Democratic Party's like the New England Patriots of football. They think it's okay to cheat and get away with it. If you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Wow. Those are
Sorry.
Let
fighting
me tell you
words.
something. When I first reported on the Republicans asking for the software and showing how it works, I had somebody from the Republican Party, not the Democratic Party, come up and said, "Why do you tell people we could have used that?"
No shit.
So
You heard it here on
don't
the
think
Convo Couch.
it only goes one way. Just don't think that happens.
Well, that was my first question, and I wanted you to prove that. And thank you for saying that. You heard it here on the Convo Couch. We got it. Clint has passed the lie detector test for his movie. He passed the Convo Couch test. He even said, Democrats said, why are you exposing that? We could use that. And yes, they did. They used it. So
there are dirty people in both sides that the only thing they want to do is win.
that's
And they
it.
don't care anything about it, because obviously the side they're on is the right side. And the other side is the wrong side. And therefore, if they cheat, it's okay.
It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They validate
That's the way
themselves. They
these
give them
people believe.
justification to cheat. They think they're more morally, ethically divine people to win, the Democrats. They really do. So
Yeah.
not only it's not Republicans, it's they cheat progressives, and that's what we experience right now. I got some super chat contributions. Do you have something to say? I'm sorry, Clint.
Does it make you mad?
Does it make me mad? It
Yes.
changed my life. I'm here talking to you instead of out running a restaurant and eating food all the time and
Then
drinking
get enough
IPA and
people-
watching
He's still eating
sports.
food, but yeah.
Get enough people to get mad that we can actually fix it, because it is fixable. The solution is not hard. You run the scanners, you have the preliminary vote, and you validate it with the count. How much easier can that be?
Well, there's
and
a
you
lot
can't
of
cheat either side.
yeah.
You
There's a
can't
lot
cheat
of
the ballots
interference
because if
out
you
there,
stuff the
though.
ballots, it won't match the machine. You
Yeah.
can't cheat the machine because it won't match the ballots.
Exactly. Why can't we have both? But these people can't even sit together at the same table. They can't. I mean, really, to tell you the truth, and that's the reason why I listen to the open source community more than anything, because they were getting ostracized. Like, oh, we go listen to Clint Curtis. They said it all the time. go listen to Clint Curtis. I'm like, I have seen Clint Curtis's movie, and I thought he was advocating for open source with a hand audit, and that's both parties should be happy, but they're like, no. And that divide is crazy. Where's the grant money going? Is this David Dill guy from Stanford? Who is this guy?
Yeah. The key is not an audit. The key is a full count. Because people, even if the audit was valid, people will no longer believe it. They're only going to believe that full count. So take the time to count it. It won't kill them.
Yeah.
It may take them a week.
Yeah.
But who cares? Just don't, you got a presumptive winner. You don't need to actually, crown him the next day. Before we changed, after Lincoln was elected, we changed the way it did so that, once the election, you start doing your cabinet so you get done really quick. Before that, it was like 6 to 8 months before you were actually validated and made the president. We could do that again if it really took that long. But with Denmark, they managed to count all their stuff in 2 days.
Yeah. If we spend as much money on elections as we do our police force or our
military.
Our military and all this other BS. I mean, this, like you said, unfortunately, we got to let the whales fend for themselves. Couple months, we'll be back there to save them. But if we
couple months, you can actually save them. You can actually save them.
The real way to save them is to have election integrity.
Right. Then you can elect people who really care about what you care about.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're just spitting in the wind.
Gotcha. Let's talk some super chats real quick. Mana Talk says the solution is voteheard.org. Have you heard of the voteheard.org?
Have not.
I have not either. We'll take a look at that. Jason V, thank you for the super chat contribution. It's always appreciated on the couch with Clint Curtis today. Please tell me you please tell me you have gotten in contact with Tim Canova. Are you watching your back? And maybe have a food taster with you. LOL.
Seriously though.
I'll eat anybody's
I know
food.
Tim Canova. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
I went down and worked with him. He was going to do an election challenge on this last one. And I gave him the sage advice, having done it before, to tell him that, everybody's with you until you really get started. And then they all leave the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And so he didn't do it because he knew that, basically he was going to bankrupt himself without any real reason of resolution, because all the laws are set up to keep you from succeeding. In his first race, they burned the ballots.
Yep.
How much more blatant can you get than I want to check the election and I'm going to destroy the ballots? So, you can't let that happen.
See, that's the crazy thing about when people say, oh, the Republicans, they talk about Stacey Abrams' race and what happened. Then we get it. But you're in Florida, and Democrats have had control of that friggin' state as far as the elections and Brendan Snipes. And guess what? They cheated like no other. So I know it's not a bipartisan thing now. It's a practice across the board, because it's not two sides of the aisle. It's one big aisle, and we're getting cheated.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well,
but there are people who will cheat you everywhere. And I'm sure, you're a Bernie guy, right?
I'm a Tulsi guy.
Okay.
I'm a Bernie guy.
Okay.
She's a Bernie gal.
Do you think there's anybody in those camps that if they could get an edge and it wasn't necessarily ethical, that they wouldn't take it?
I believe Bernie himself would never take advantage of that chance.
No, not Bernie. His people.
His people, well, his people suck this time, but Bernie himself, the reason why even the Republicans say he's the most, and by the way, he's the one who used to say, it's one big aisle, but I believe that because the establishment crew that you're dealing with there, they vote along the lines of the Republicans there. They have the same interest in mind. It seems like they cheat for each other in Florida, but I don't believe Bernie would have cheated, but yes, the people in his campaign, of course.
Anybody could have, but they don't have the power.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, they don't have the power. The power lies with the Democratic establishment, which is why they're fighting so hard to really not give us a fair shake at the system. And when we don't have a fair shake at the system, you're going to continue fighting for Medicare for all, fighting for climate activism, for a Green New Deal. You're never going to get it because you're not looking. And Bernie himself was afraid to be propped like a Ralph Nader of sorts, because that's why he didn't really stand up. That he knew that there was something going on, but he has refused to say anything about it because he didn't want to be maligned and ostracized like Nader was, which to me is ridiculous. But
then whose fault is it?
Bernie's-
Exactly.
It's Bernie.
100%.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean, there will be people that cheat everywhere. They just will. If they're human, you will find a group of people that cheat.
Yeah.
A lot of those people will gravitate to politics. And as far as whether they have the resources, all they need is the best programmer that day. That's
Yeah.
all they need.
Well,
They don't need 100. They just need access, and they need the best programmer.
let
Now
me
they're
ask
going to
you.
be now they're going to be wrestling all the other people that want to cheat, and now it's open season because everybody knows you can. If you didn't know before, you know now.
Okay, let me ask you a question then, because a lot of people right there. So somebody had a super chat contribution. I'm going to ask you as part of this question as well too. And thank you very much, Greg Vera, who left a super chat contribution. How did we get here was the question. What has the establishment done to hack voting machines and co-opt the system, and how can people reverse those actions? And that would lead me into another question on top of that. What could have Bernie done to protest these elections, 2020, 2016? Since you're an expert at this process, what if you were working for Bernie and Bernie says, I want this, these elections weren't fair, what would have Clint Curtis done as his lawyer to go in and protest this?
I actually had a couple Bernie people contact me, and I told them he has to stand up and challenge the election. If he doesn't challenge it, you have no standing. So if he says, I don't think things are right, but they might be, that is not a good reason. Then he has to challenge it in the state where it is. The time frames are very short, like a month. And you have to get the data in that month. So it's very tough to do. It's a big process. It's hard. He's likely going to be called a sore loser. All people are going to malign him. How horrible it is. He's challenging this system. The SOE, who isn't necessarily involved at all because they have no idea what's going on. They have no idea what's going on in that machine. Yeah. They are just administrator, functionaries, probably couldn't program hello on a old IBM, whatever that thing is. They have no clue. It's all magic to them. And they bring in other people that they don't know, that they pay, who manage the system for them. So they're going to be against him because it's going to reflect how badly they did, even though it doesn't. It has nothing to do with whether they did well or they did bad. If the machine is wrong, the machine is wrong. And if the paper's there and you don't challenge it, then you're just out of luck.
Yeah. So you got to challenge it. So
you got to stand up.
Well, here's my suggestion. You know how you say, like, oh, they'll be called a cheater, they'll be called... No, it's the other way around right now. The youth is... When I asked Johnny, when he first joined the Convo Couch a couple years ago, I said, Johnny, a lot of your friends, why didn't they vote? He goes, they don't believe their vote's going to be counted, Pasta. They don't believe that. And that's where people stand. That's why they don't go to vote. And that's why they break the system and keep it long, because young people aren't going to go sit around for 7 hours to vote. I mean, some will, and knock on wood, a lot. But the masses won't. The single mother's got to get home. So isn't the move, for instance, I have a friend who's running for Congress out here. Her name is Angelica Duenas. As soon as the election is over, protest it right away. Lock it up, seal it up, go after the data. As soon as they close the polls, I'm protesting the election. On what grounds? On the grounds that you're a bunch of cheating son of a bitches.
Did she lose?
Protest it.
What if she doesn't lose?
Well, she's running against an establishment, neoliberal warmongering violation of our civil liberties hack in Tony Cardenas. I believe that those are the people controlling the machines. Those friends of theirs are the ones who pick the vendors. I believe they're going to cheat her no matter what.
The history of Los Angeles elections is nefarious, to say the least. I mean, the Board of Elections here held a hearing where people had 1 minute to protest, like to voice their agony with what happened, and it was the Board of Supervisors.
They waited 9 hours.
I waited 9 hours to speak 1 minute, and I spoke because we literally saw everything happened at firsthand, the whole thing. I mean, we were on this for a year and a half before it happened. We were told, it's going to be an improvement. The ballot marking device is very easy to use. Yes, we're going to go from 4,000 polling places to under 1,000, but you're going to have 10 days to vote. But what they failed to tell people was that they weren't going to get the machines out of boxes till 3 days before. The machines weren't validated for they had way too many errors. They had they were just not, they should have never been used. And the people that were being trained had 1 day of training. And so they came on our show telling us like, this is going to be a mess. This is going to be a disaster. And it turned out it was. And the entire time we were being gaslighted by the Secretary of State, Alex Padilla. So it does not surprise me that there would be corruption, because Alex Padilla, while Hillary Clinton was running her primary, he was on, like, pretty much, he had endorsed her as the person that's overseeing the elections. That's a conflict of interest. So for the Los Angeles elections, it's not out of the question to say that they are entirely corrupt. Now, how we prove that and how we get to it, that's the difficult part, I think.
Isn't it the autopsy?
All you got to do is get rid of them. And that one guy who said his vote won't count, he's probably right. But if he takes 3 friends with him, his vote will count. Because when you get the numbers up there, they can't cheat it.
Overwhelm the system.
Overwhelm the system. They can cheat one guy all day long. If you get if you get an even race, they can do whatever they want to. But they don't want to make it an 18-point landslide at that point, because then you can check it. And while that didn't work for me, if enough people do it, it will work for them.
Yeah.
You can recreate it. Even if the paper doesn't exist, you can go door to door and you can all that. Pre-decide what areas you're going to check.
That's true.
But don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Those numbers will be right and the rest will be wrong.
Right. Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying, Clint, but like here in LA, 3-hour lines, Texas, 3-4 hour lines. So it's like, now it's like, I don't even know what else to do other than protest at election officials' house, protest at the Secretary of State's house until they make a change. What do you think?
You've got to elect people that make it a cause of action to treat people that way, to make it a violation of civil rights and a legal cause of action, and put a price tag on it. Strip away the immunity the county would have and say, that person waited 3 hours. They can now sue you and get $2,000 in attorney's fees. First of all, you'll have 500 attorneys lined up with them, and they'll be taking those cases all day long. Because as long as you make the cause of action, you had a duty to perform, you didn't perform it, and this person was damaged, and the damages are statutory, they really don't have anything they can say.
We got to get something to sign people up. We got to get another call to action. Get that. I have a feeling, Clint, you're going to be friends with the Convo Couch moving forward as we tackle on election integrity, because we're not letting this go into the shadows. We're not sleeping on this. This is a big thing for this show here. Everybody in this room, we spent a lot of time running down these elections, and what we saw, we're not going to stop. Not at all. So,
not even if you see a whale in trouble.
You know what? I'm going to tell the whale, hold on for a couple months. We got to take care of election integrity, and your life will be saved.
Well, you can push him back in the ocean first, but then do it.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Couple months is too long.
So, in your honest opinion, do you think Bernie Sanders was cheated in 2016 and 2020? Carrie Mark has that question, and no matter what, you're saying I'm saying he didn't have the political will to challenge the vote right away, and that was the problem. But do you think he was cheated in 2016 and 2020?
I don't know. It seems like it.
Yeah.
It seems like it. I was actually a Clinton supporter, but because Bernie never told me how he was going to pay for things, and that always bothers me. I want to know how you're going to pay for things. That's it.
We
tell me how you pay for it, and even if you're stupid and it's dumb, I'll still at least know you're trying. Just don't tell me. I'll think about it later. But anyway, so I was a Clinton supporter, but it seemed like, he had all of the momentum and he had all the polling, and then he'd go in and suddenly, even though his people all voted, the votes never came out right. So it does seem like there was a problem. Did he stand up? No. What's that mean? He legitimately lost, because if he gave it away, you lose too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were going to advise him to go, if you were his lawyer and you wanted to fight this, you would have said, we're protesting the election right away?
I advised his people to protest it. I advised Stacey Abrams' people contacted me after that fiasco in Georgia. I said, contest it today. Contest it today. There's a guy up in North Carolina named Singletary. They didn't even put him on half the ballots, just left him off from this incumbent that wanted to continue, having his seat forever. and he still hasn't been able to overturn the election. So he wanted to hire attorneys, but he doesn't have any money. So, he's going to have that same problem. He was willing to stand up, but he lacks resources. Bernie didn't lack resources, so he doesn't have that excuse. Some people do.
Yeah.
Do you need to be within a certain margin to protest an election, or can you protest it right away? I mean, a lot of people were saying, why didn't Tulsi protest the elections in New Hampshire? But doesn't it cost a lot of money to do this?
It certainly does. You have to pay for the check. And the check can be expensive because you have to pay somebody to sit there and count. And usually, like if it was in the Trump recounts, there are people there to destroy the count. So, the lawyers are sitting there yelling at the people trying to do the count. And if their count is off, then they can't count and they have to start over. So they drive the price up.
Jesus.
So we have to be a little more civil. Plus, in Michigan, which is kind of strange, if the ballots that they have don't match the machine number, let's say the machine says there's 200 ballots and I only have 194, they won't recount the stack. To me, it would seem like, well, I really want to recount the stack then. But no, their law says, no, we don't even count that. We just go with the machine total. So as long as we allow that, you're going to have cheating. It's, if someone won it, all I have to just take and throw away one ballot and it's forever the machine count. It's just stupid. It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
So
I think you cleared that up. What about the Jared Beck case in Florida? Do you have any things to say about that? Where people, when pretty much the Democratic Party admitted that they just go in the back room, filled with cigar smoke, and pick whoever they want. What do you say about that? Are you running as a Democrat?
Technically, parties can do that.
Jeez.
I mean, we haven't done that. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party hasn't done that since the 50s. But that used to be the way they did it. They all got together. All the bigwigs would get together. They get drunk and smoke cigars in the back and go, well, I think Ulysses would be a good president. So I think we've moved on from that by bylaws, because parties have bylaws. By bylaws, they could do that, but for someone to actually say that, they probably weren't thinking.
Yeah, I mean, they
wouldn't have a
ignored their
party
own
list
charter.
if they did that.
They ignored their own bylaws. They ignored their own charter. Yeah. They should have to pay back all that money because they pretty much said that a democratic election doesn't have to be democratic.
Yep.
Who said that? I
mean, the guy who said they can go in the back room and pick whoever they want. And in essence, the lawyer for the DNC in the Jared Beck case in Florida.
Lawyers will say anything.
They will. Well, thank you for clearing that up because a lot of people felt that, that Bernie Sanders should have protested the election right away. I thought so right away. I think a lot of people that walked away from him in 2016 felt that this was his greatest sin. This is I say it all the time. Bernie Sanders' greatest sin is that he didn't protest these elections. He had the resources. He had all the election integrity activists on both sides of the spectrum ready to go and fight for him. Why didn't he do it?
I don't know. Doesn't make any sense. Stacey Abrams had the same thing. And she had even a better situation because she could target individual spots that she could hit. Because being African American, not getting the right turnout in a black community is probably a pretty good indication something's wrong and gives you a direct target so you can get in there and get it done. Didn't do it. Decided to take the high road and just contest it down the road.
It's the stigma of being a sore loser. That's like it really is stupid, but it is one of the main reasons they don't do it.
It's dumb. I mean, really, to tell you the truth, if you think that every vote should count, you should be fighting for every single vote, no matter what. That's why I'm saying right away. So how much would it cost in just like a district of yours to protest your election?
Let's say, well, if you want to do the whole district,
yes,
the whole district's going to be 400,000 people. So 400,000 to get people to get in there and count. You probably do 3 or 4 ballots per minute. Although you're only doing one race, right?
Yeah.
Okay, only doing one race. You probably do 10 ballots per minute. And so what would that be? $10 an hour? Do the math. A lot.
How much? 4 million?
Well,
$400,000, $10 per hour?
Yeah.
Let me do the math here real quick since you really want the math.
Because I'm thinking the best thing we can do right now is like pick a district. Like there's 3 people that are running out here. and I want them to protest their election immediately. You
Well, you
know,
don't have to
there's 3 of
protest
them. I
the
can tell you who
whole
they
thing.
are.
You don't
What's
have to
that?
do the whole district. You can do a precinct here, a precinct there. You can
How do you
find
get
the
the
spots
mail-ins?
where you know you're good. And
I
then
want
you
to
can
get to
go
the
out and look 'em.
mail-ins. I want to make sure we look at the mail-ins. I think
And you
they're
look
really
at the mail-ins, of course. You look at the mails, you look at the signatures, you'll make sure they're right, and go to the people that mailed them in and say, "Do you mail in your ballot?"
yeah.
Because you go door to door and you collect the affidavits, and they go, "I didn't mail in my ballot. I threw it in the trash." Well, then how come it's there with a signature on it?
Yeah.
You know, you can actually see things if you want to.
I want the mail-ins that are going to say Tony Cardenas and Joe Biden. Like, who is this person? This person is dead. How do we figure that out?
Well, you
That's
shouldn't
what
have
I
too
wanna
many
find.
dead people. That should have been a purge.
Yeah.
So,
And
because they
things
have
like
purges.
yeah, when they
Okay.
pull away votes.
Yes. And
You know.
purges, some purges are valid, some purges are not. Basically, they'll send you out something in the mail that says, "Return this so I know you're alive." And if you don't
Yes.
return it, to them, you're not alive.
Yes.
That's the only way they know. They don't go through and check obituaries and see if you've moved from Hawaii to wherever you are in California.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there was a lady who was in the paper the other day. She said that her husband had voted 4 times since he died. And for the Democrat.
that's dedication.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? We're going to look into this. We're going to talk more because I want to be able to protest these elections. I think people have. Have you heard of Raji Rob? His case. Take it to the
No.
Supreme Court.
No.
All right. Well, it's on the Convo Couch. It's one of our videos. You should check it out. Raji Rob is actually fighting in the courts right now. He's trying to get access to look into the machine that has proprietary software and whatnot. Johnny, do you want to mention anything about that, Clint?
Yeah, and he also started a petition. I don't know. It looks like the courts are definitely just not. They're just ignoring him. I mean,
Yeah, that's what they do.
Well, there's a
Have you
lot
read
of
those issues,
case law
Clint?
that it is proprietary software and you're not allowed to see it. So, but the point is, even if he gets the software, he won't know if it's real. Prior to becoming a lawyer, I was a programmer. I did system analysis, all that kind of thing. Half the time I would go to these large companies and they were trying to take over the actual work for the company themselves where they'd farmed it out, and they couldn't get their version to work. And 90% of the time, the version that they had been given as the software they were running on their machines was not the software they were running on their machines. And unless you then make an exe of one and an exe of the other, and you do a binary compare, you don't know. So the only way it would really work is for him to, am I boring you? Because this is kind of geeky. It was kind of geeky stuff.
No, trust me, we're listening to all of it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Are you geeky? Okay, anyway.
Well, they're election integrity.
Because usually when I say the word binary, people's eyes glaze over. You know, they just fall asleep on the couch.
No, our engineer here he knows this stuff.
that's a bit geeky.
I'm sure he's listening, but you know. So there's you do a binary compare line for line, and you can see where it doesn't fit. You can't see what the right code is, and you can't see what doesn't fit, but you can see it doesn't match.
Mm.
And 99% of the time, huge companies, big multi-million-dollar companies, getting this software, not doing the comparison themselves, you know. And on this one, you know, after I went there and showed them why it wasn't working properly because they were being cheated, then they got hold of the company and they said, "No, yours is different because we compiled it differently." You compiled it differently?
Yeah.
You wrote your own compiler? Then shouldn't you have given it to them? Which, of course, they didn't, and eventually they settled and got it fixed. But, you know, people will say the stupidest thing. So
don't we just take it out of their hands? Shouldn't we have a bill countrywide? No more proprietary software? I mean, isn't that the first thing we should do is take the corporations out of the game?
Right.
We can then, I mean, any other way seems like we're working backwards. But, you know, even in L.A., you know what they're doing here? They're obfuscating the situation going, oh, it's a public system. It's not owned by proprietary software. And we're like, great, give us the source code. Like, we don't have it. Isn't that the meaning of open source? It's like you have to give us the source code.
right.
But yet they're changing the definition now of open source.
Right.
And they're saying it's public. I'm like, yeah, it's public, but it's really not public. We can't look at it if we don't get a source code.
Right.
Shouldn't we just, boom, corporate Congress, let's go. No more proprietary software. Everything has to be transparent to the public eye. Wouldn't that be the best course of action?
Well, it's hard to do a negative one, but what I'm proposing is that we have open source scanners followed by a full count. So if you pass that, the problem will be solved. Because you will know that whatever went through that machine and whatever was voted is actually matching and is the same. And if you add in the two parties actually having a representative in the supervisor of elections office in each county, then you know that there's somebody who doesn't trust somebody who's looking at each other all the time. And if they mess up, they're going to tell on them. Of course, you got to be careful they're not buddies, and
That's the thing, though. It's one team, though. That's why I hate even talk about anything doing the duopoly of the Democrats and the Republicans. I think they're the best friends behind closed doors, half of them. So if you
as
got
a Democrat, I
into
can tell you we're really not.
Yeah, but you're not in their club.
Well, I'm not in their club.
They never let you in their
not
club.
in their club.
Jim
Yeah,
Feeney is
they
their
will never
club,
let me in their
buddy.
club.
Tom Feeney.
Tom Feeney.
Yeah.
He's part of their club. You're still listen. We're gonna go up there to Florida. I'm gonna come see you. We're gonna independent next time. Clint Curtis, we're taking you to a different level. We're gonna forget about the Russians and the Chinese. We're gonna concentrate on everything here, and we're gonna do what needs to be done. We're just gonna reinvent you, buddy.
If you pass what I'm telling you to, it doesn't matter who hacks it because it won't stand.
I hear you.
Exactly.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. I agree.
I don't want our audience to cancel you, Clint, because I see that happening. But we have our differences. I mean, Clinton, to me, she was a huge warmonger, and we can definitely pay for Bernie's policies. With modern money theory, and then Russia. I mean, I suggest our audience watch your documentary.
Yeah.
Even though we
It's a good
disagree
documentary.
on candidate choice and economic theories and Russia being a bad guy when the U.S. is the largest empire in the world, killing black and brown kids in the Middle East and across South America by coup d'etats.
Hear, hear.
I think we all agree that our election system is fucked and we need to fight. You suggest overwhelming the vote. I personally think action on the ground makes these corrupt fuckers uncomfortable and might move them in the right direction. This is our democracy on the line, and I can recognize that you are there with us. So I will not cancel you. I suggest our audience do the same.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you're
There's
on our
only a
side.
few. Yeah.
I mean, he's got JFK in the
The biggest
background.
problem with the protesting of this is it is procedural, and procedural is boring. So
Yeah.
while we have some people that showed up initially with protests, it gets old pretty quick. There's not a face you can put with it. There's not, someone who died because it's leaning on your neck. Democracy's dying, but you don't have the camera shot of it.
Yeah.
So it's hard to keep that momentum up. But if you can do it,
I think
with
both. I think we need both. We need to do both when it comes to our elections. Do you have a super chat you want to read?
Yeah, Greg Vera says, even though we vote by mail, we should still be volunteering to work at the polls to observe the process and call out the inconsistencies. And that's true, Greg, but the only problem is that we also need people to watch. When people tell me you can't prove that election was rigged, I'm like, you can't prove to me that it wasn't rigged because it's a black box, non-transparent, proprietary software system.
So
and that's one of the biggest problems is that even if it wasn't, people don't have trust in it.
Yeah.
Right. It's a distrust in the system.
If Donald Trump won, 90% of the people won't believe it. If he lost, 90% of the people won't believe it. So it doesn't really, as long as we have this, I'll tell you who wins thing going on, no one's ever going to trust the system. You don't trust the system and you don't have any faith in it, then you also don't trust the people we elect. Or don't, depending on how it works.
Man, that was good. Johnny, anything else? That was a great little thing you had to say there at the end. Yeah, and I want to say to some of those audience members who are just kind of a little bit turned off by some of Clint's beliefs. This is the areas, ladies and gentlemen. We might not agree on the same candidates, but we're fighting for the same thing here right now. And this is something to take in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Republicans and Democrats have to work together on this. Independents, everybody cares that our election process is fair, transparent, and
everybody
clean.
should care. They don't care. That's the problem.
Most people, most people, they just don't understand. They're very naive to what's going on. They're ignorant. They don't understand that it's owned by private corporations, our election systems, and we need to eliminate that. We need to have, I believe, open source and hand counting. Do them both. Do them in the precincts before they get outside that precincts. You're in Florida. You've seen all these ballots going everywhere, putting on trucks. But you were an amazing guest today. Like I said, I'm gonna get up there. We're gonna transform Clint Curtis.
We're
gonna
gonna
make you a rock
radicalize him.
star. Forget about it.
We're radicalizing Clint Curtis.
That's it. You know
There you
what I'm saying?
go. People think I'm pretty radical anyway.
We're gonna push election integrity. We're gonna tell people, wait to save the whales. Let's work on, listen, I made a bunch of tweets one night. I have some people that still follow me to this day because I said it. Hey, you like a Green New Deal? You can't have it without election integrity. Hey, you want Medicare for all? You can't have it without election integrity. Hey, you want to end all these regime change wars? You cannot have it without election integrity. Election integrity is our First Amendment's rights. The people's voice is what's supposed to count. You don't have that, you don't have anything. Clint, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
sir.
We appreciate it.
So for Pasta Jardula,
Fiorella.
Sue on those 1s and 2s with Clint Curtis in the house.
Convo